I was living with my then partner at the time. We lived in a relatively nice suburb, in a nice villa, with 2 cats. We lived there for 3 years and got to know the neighbours well. My partner was working, but I wasn't. He worked at Coles, so I took care of the house and drove my partner to and from work because he didn't have a licence at that stage. Unfortunately though, our car we had, the registration of the vehicle couldn't be renewed, as the car was going to cost too much to fix, to pass a rego test. Despite the car running fine, the dash inside the car had a massive crack in it, so it wouldn't pass the test, so the car was taken off the road. Which then meant we had no car, we couldn't afford to buy another one, we had to rely on public transport or friends to drive us around. But to catch public transport from where we lived, walking was involved. It involved walking up the street, and then to walk along this spooky pathway through dense bushland and over a creek to get to the next street over, where the bus stop was, and the train station was another block further over. The walk was nice though, although it did take 20 minutes to walk to the train station, but only about 12 minutes to the closest bus stop. And the path going through the bush, that felt very creepy, because walking through there, you felt like you were being watched. It was a very unsettling feeling. One afternoon, I walked with my partner to the train station because he was on late night shift at Coles. I would see him off on the train and then I would walk back home. The street I would have to walk up would be past a takeaway shop and food grocer. For some reason, there would be shady looking people hanging around outside all the time. As I would walk by, I made sure I was on the opposite side of the road, even though it was bushland. That afternoon though, it had been raining, so the other side of the road was a tad underwater, so I had to walk on the shop side of the road. There were 3 guys sitting out the front, and they were talking loudly. They had seen me and started yelling out to me. I ignored them, and I kept walking at a faster pace. They didn't follow me, but it was enough for me to move quicker. I finally got to the bus stop before the spooky pathway, and by then I knew I was over halfway home. I walked over the creek and through the spooky path and back onto my street, and then I was finally home. But I had to do that walk all over again later that night, because there was no way my partner would have walked home alone. Later that evening, now into the night, it was time for me to do that walk again, but in the dark. I had done it now quite a few times, so I wasn't really that scared. My partner finished work at 10 p.m, so he would get the train at 10:20 and be at our home station at 10:30 p.m. So I would leave the house and start walking at 10:10 p.m. to meet him at 10:30 p.m, as it took 20 minutes to walk. As I got to the spooky path, I decided to put my flashlight on. It wasn't lit up with any street lights, so it was very dark in there at night. Once again, I had that feeling come over me that I had been watched. I was very aware of my surroundings, and it was a very quiet night too, so I could hear the tiniest sounds, until the silence was drowned out by the sound of the creek running as I approached it. I was now at the bus stop, and there wasn't anyone around, not that I could see anyway. I kept following the street up towards the train station, and I could hear footsteps behind me. I turned to look around, and I couldn't see anyone. They didn't sound like they were very close. I kept walking another 20 meters or so, and then I heard it again. This time, they sounded louder, closer, and more like running. I turned around again, and I still couldn't see anyone. I felt like someone was following me though, and I could hear the footsteps loud and clear. Maybe they ducked down behind a car, or hid behind a tree. I walked as quickly as I could to the train station. I was almost at the takeaway shop at this point, and I couldn't hear the footsteps anymore. Just as I got to the station though, the train pulls in. I met my partner and we started back for home. I told him that I thought I was being followed on the way there. He told me to stop trying to scare him, but I said I wasn't kidding. We both have our wits about ourselves now. We were now on the long stretch, heading towards the bus stop. This I felt was the longest part of the walk, and this is where I heard the footsteps earlier. I was just hoping that we didn't bump into anyone, but with the two of us together, we could protect each other. About 100 meters in front of us were two guys walking in the same direction as us. My partner didn't think anything of it, but I kind of did, because we were walking through the more sketchy part of the suburb that we lived in. All of a sudden, I noticed there were now 3 guys in front of us, all walking together. Where did the third guy come from? He wasn't there a second ago. They reached the bus stop and crossed the street into the spooky path. I really didn't want to follow them in there, but we had no choice unless we followed the road up and around to our street. That would have added an extra 15 minutes to our walk. When we got to the bus stop, I told my partner to wait a minute. I wanted to at least wait 5 minutes, so I knew these guys had walked through the path. But he didn't want to wait. He wanted to keep going. As we crossed the creek, I turned my flashlight on so we could see where we were going. We walked up the path 15 meters or so, and my partner then suddenly stopped. "Babe, listen." We could hear voices, but it wasn't coming from in front of us or behind us. It seemed to be coming from the left of us, in the bushes. We walked a little further to then see a clearing to the left of us. The voices were coming from in there. We thought they were all male voices originally, but now we could hear a female voice also. I decided to shine my light in there to see who was there, as we couldn't see any other lights. All of a sudden, we see 3 guys and a girl in there, in complete darkness. One of the guys yelled out, so we ran off, back up the path towards our street. We got back to our street, but we were being followed there by one of the guys before he turned around and went back down the path. We were at walking pace now, and it suddenly clicked to me that the guys that we had just seen were the same guys that I had seen out the front of the takeaway shop earlier that afternoon, and I also think they were nearby the train station too. I honestly don't think they were watching us as such, but because we had all been hanging around the area that day, the guys may have just wanted to scare us, but we didn't know if they were armed with weapons or under the influence of drugs or alcohol, so we didn't want to take our chances by hanging around. We kept looking behind us to make sure we weren't being followed, which we weren't. Nevertheless, what the 3 guys and the girl were up to off the spooky path can't have been good. We never stumbled onto those guys again.